Hello, this is Chris Allen. I want to talk today about dolmens. We know very little about these ancient structures. In this presentation I will attempt to show you how widespread they are and also to speculate about why they exist. This cute little dolmen is from the North Caucasus region of Russia. This one is covered on all sides. One can almost imagine Fred Flintstone dragging his new wife to this one. Take note of the capstone, which seems to be close to half a meter thick. Stones on this dolmen and all of this type of dolmen seem to have been at least trimmed to fit fairly well. As you can see, they have fairly close fitting sides, and the top is fairly close fitting on the sides as well. Another from the same region, the capstone appears even thicker and seems almost as though someone wanted to steal it, found it too heavy, as the capstone seems unnaturally offset. All of the Russian dolmen, at least some stones appear to cut to fit. This is the Volkonsky dolmen. It's one of only a few what is known as monolithic dolmen, and is quite special. By monolithic they mean it is carved from a single stone. In other words, the dolmen is carved within the stone, as you see in the picture, and it's not separate stones which are assembled. The stone itself has been hollowed out. What is pretty strange about this is that in the close proximity there is an area hollowed out using a tube drill, and you can observe the two pictures at the bottom. You can see quite clearly they must have used a tube drill to create this hollowed out area in the bedrock quite close to this dolmen. Now it's a bit strange, because there's a very similar feature not far from Cusco in Peru. It's, I think, in the hills above Sacsayhuaman. Somewhere in that area there's a very similar feature to this. I have to wonder who would have had a tube drill, and this is roughly 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, they say, because that's how old the dolmen is supposed to be, and I presume that this feature was made at the same time. And very likely, although I don't know this, it's very likely that the hollowing out of the stone of the main dolmen was also done using tube drills. As you can see, tube drills have been used at the bottom here. This one is also in the North Caucasus region, and as you can see, the stones must have been worked, and they even have some quite extensive decorations on them. I don't know if the decoration of the middle stone is meant to represent a dolmen in itself. I don't know. Or I doubt if they had tables in those days. Anyway, as you can see, there's also a pretty substantial capstone on this one. This, I think, is just another view of the same dolmen, also in the North Caucasus area, but it's the same dolmen from the previous slide. And as you can see, it even has almost an assembly area in the front of it, and maybe this was a chief of the tribe's personal dolmen. I don't know. Looks like it may have been. Somebody took a lot of trouble to put extra optional extras on it. This is in China, and again you can see a fairly substantial capstone, and It also seems as though it may have been sort of covered on four sides, although there seems to be broken side in the front. Exactly what happened there or what it looked like original, we can't tell. But this is in China. This is also in China. This is much more common style of dolmen. It seems to have been made using slabs of stone that were available in the immediate vicinity. Naturally, I'm guessing because none of us were around when the time these things were built, but it looks like it was a sort of a hurriedly assembled arrangement, and it was made using, and I mean, even so, it still has a very, very substantial capstone to it. This is in Korea. It's one of an estimated 35,000 examples in Korea alone. So that gives you some idea of the extent of these things. There are lots of them. Some of the capstones are said to weigh over 300 tons. Now this particular capstone, I think is a little bit overdone as far as the capstone is concerned. That looks like it was meant to withstand the attack from a nuclear missile. Of course, it would only be a direct hit on it and not. If the missile was a little bit down either side, it would incinerate everybody underneath it anyway. But it does seem to be a bit overkill. I don't think it really needed to be as thick as all that. This is also in Korea. Not too much different from the other one, similar thing we saw in China just now. Also looks like it's made from slabs of stone that were lying around, but these are obviously very substantial slabs of stone. They're not something you would be maneuvering into your garden with your wheelbarrow. But it's still pretty substantial. It could take a direct hit of let's say a heavy meteorite or something, and whoever's underneath it would be protected. It's another one from Korea. This is a low profile model, and it looks like you would have to lie down underneath it. But I'm still pretty sure that this is a dolmen. It seems to stand on stones which raise it from the ground, even although the space underneath it looks like less than a meter. But it is definitely, I think, a dolmen. This is a group of dolmen in Japan. This Japanese dolmen group is also in fairly low profile, surrounded by what is called tumulus, or tumuli I suppose is the plural. And well, for me, a tumulus is a passage type dolmen which has been covered over, and that is now referred to as a tumulus or tumuli. This particular dolmen, which is also of course called a tumulus, also comes from Japan, and it is, for me, it's a standard dolmen that's been covered over, and it's now called a tumuli. All dolmens and mounds of this kind are regarded by academics as burial sites. I personally think they were used for burials long after they were initially built. This dolmen is in India. India has many dolmens. How many exactly I don't know. Some of which have been dismantled for building material, which occurs in many areas around the world. This particular dolmen appears to have been made from different types of stone. The uprights appear to be some kind of volcanic tuff, even look possibly blackened from heat at some stage. Capstone appears to be a sandstone, showing signs of having been separated from a larger sheet. Capstone also appears substantial, at least 500 millimeters thick, which seems to be sort of the minimum for most dolmens, is to have at least a 500 millimeter thick capstone. This is also in India, and this is a whole field of dolmens. So they're fairly small, but there are lots of them, and I think in this particular picture you can see probably around 10. Some of them are not whole anymore. As you can see, they've been dismantled. Interesting feature is they're all made from unworked stone construction. There's no stones have not been worked to fit at all. And also the capstone is probably the thinnest you are likely to find on any dolmen. This is also in India. This dolmen seems to be in a field of broken dolmen, and you can notice that the capstone on this is actually pretty thin by comparison to most. Probably about the thinnest you're ever going to find. It's even be described as quite flimsy. This passage type dolmen is in Iran. Has the appearance of being extensively damaged. Of course, can't say how it got damaged, but it is known that some sections of Islam believe in breaking down any ancient structures which cannot be attributed to the glory of Allah. That's not everybody that feels that way, but there are some that do. Whether that happened to this dolmen or not, I really can't say. I have no idea. Now we have a dolmen from Kazakhstan. This also has a substantial capstone, and I've included here because, well, I just want to show how many diverse countries actually have dolmen. And I think in the northern hemisphere, nearly every country does have some dolmen, at least. This dolmen is in Germany. It's one of several in Germany. Doesn't quite showcase the German precision that you would normally expect, but it is nevertheless a dolmen in Germany. This dolmen is in Jordan in the Middle East. It's one of several Middle East dolmens, or Middle East countries with dolmens. A lot have been dismantled for building material, but they are now protected by the authorities. But this is more or less your standard type dolmen, which is used totally uncut stones. They appear to be made from stones which we have immediately available. Again, the one chosen as a capstone is quite substantial. It's fairly thick. This is an odd-looking cluster of dolmen. It's from Holland or the Netherlands, but it does fit the normal type of dolmen. It just seems to be all together and look like it's almost a communal group of dolmen. Of course, some of them have fallen apart over the years, I guess. You can see loose stones lying around, but initially they were probably all would have looked pretty much the same, all covered the same, and I things have obviously changed in the thousands of years since it was built. This dolmen is in France. It's known as the Dolmen de Bagnoux. My French pronunciation, I'm pretty sure, sucks, but it is in France, and it is a passage type dolmen, and this one is pretty large. In fact, I think it's large enough to be used as a 6-car garage. There are other dolmens of this type in France, some of which have been covered over to form what is known today as tumuli or tumulus, and this is one that has not been covered over. This slide shows the interior of the Dolmen de Bagnoux, and as you can see, it is quite spacious inside. According to Wikipedia, the central column you see there doesn't actually hold anything up, so it must be just there for show, or maybe initially they had a chunk of wood under the to help hold the capstone up. But it's, as I said, fairly spacious inside. You could easily park 6 cars into it, and it's quite understandable why somebody might want to bury their granddad in this. It would certainly keep him safe from animals and whatever. This is also in France. There's a dolmen on the left, which is right next to, well, I suppose, a smallish tumulus, and which probably also started out as a dolmen initially. This one is also called a tumulus mound, and this is in Spain, and it is actually a passage dolmen which has been covered over, and it's pretty well known as one of the biggest dolmens around, I think. What is especially interesting about this one is there's actually a well on the inside of it. And the purpose of a well inside a dolmen, I'm not sure. Maybe that was so that the mourners could slake their thirsts after burying grandpa. This is one of many dolmen in Portugal. In fact, the area of France and the Iberian Peninsula, which is Portugal and Spain, they seem to be a bit of a hotspot for dolmen of all sorts, because there are quite a lot in that area, and well, this is one of them. As you can see, there's no worked stone here. All of the stone is, well, it does at least seem flat on the one side. This dolmen is in England, and it does have a fairly unusual appearance. An interesting point about English dolmens, I noticed in the encyclopedia.com, they say that dolmens are found chiefly in Britain and France. I'm afraid they're wrong about that. They are found in a much wider range than that. This is known as the Dwarfie Steen. Officially it's called a chambered tomb. It actually has 2 chambers inside. Now it's known as a chambered tomb which was carved out of a single stone. Personally, I would say it is a monolithic dolmen, and The fact that it has 2 chambers, I guess you might call it a main ensuite dolmen in modern terms. This dolmen is in Wales. As you can see, there are stones around which look as though there were other dolmen also around that same area. And they're not all whole anymore, but this one at least still survives. This is a dolmen in Ireland. As you can see again, none of the stones appear to have been shaped at all. They all look like flat rock that was found lying around. This is what is known as Newgrange in Ireland. It's a fairly famous monument, and as you can see, there are quite a few people visiting it. And it is also known as a tumulus or burial mound type of thing. But to my mind, this was originally a dolmen, and been significant additions to it during later years, but I think it started out life as a dolmen. The interior tends to show the same. I haven't got a slide of the interior here, but they are freely available on the internet. Not to be outdone, the Swiss also have dolmens. This one is in Switzerland and does help to demonstrate just how widespread these dolmens are. As you can see, the Swiss had not quite fully stabilized their intricate engineering. So this also looks like it's made of stones that were just lying around and nothing has been cut to fit. But it is common with, it's pretty much the same as most other dolmen from anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. This massive structure is in Montana in the USA, and the sides do seem to be unnecessarily high. I don't know what's going on there, but I don't know, maybe it's an early American version of a skyscraper. Some people say it's a freak of nature that the stones ended up in this set up all on their own. Exactly how that would have happened, I am not sure. But there they are. Dolmen or freak of nature, you make up your own mind. This is also in the USA. Is this a dolmen or a glacial erratic? Many archaeologists or scientists of some kind or other call this a glacial erratic, but I can't see a glacial erratic settling so nicely on some supporting stones just to leave a space underneath. So I'm going to guess that this is probably a dolmen. This dolmen is also in the Americas. It's from Colombia. There's actually one of many in Colombia. They're still discovering them even as we speak, I think. It seems to have a trough on the inside of it, animal drinking trough, which looks as though it might have been carved from stone or maybe made from concrete. I don't know. I've never been there, so I have no idea. But it is in South America, but it is still north of the equator. Now we come to the difficult part. Who built these mysterious structures? Why did they build them? When did they build them? And why only in the Northern Hemisphere? Why do archaeologists insist they have a funerary purpose? There are a lot of questions and very few answers. This particular illustration shows what is known as the Younger Dryas debris field. Making some sense out of dolmens is going to require a little sideways thinking, maybe more than a little. So this particular picture is of the Younger Dryas debris field. Sorry, the Younger Dryas debris field. And you must be wondering, what could this possibly have to do with dolmens? Well, I'm going to get to that, but if you'll notice on this illustration here, all of the action seems to take place in the northern hemisphere, which is maybe a clue as to why our dolmens all occur in the northern hemisphere. Just to read what it says here, could the previous cataclysms have anything to do with dolmens? Below is a graphic of what the extended zone of Younger Dryas comet impact might have been. This is called a debris field, as can be seen it is restricted to the northern hemisphere. Is this significant? Is it possible that there might have been a stream of comet particles similar to the Taurus stream, which we still experience today? That's the Taurus meteor stream, by the way. What if there was an annual event where the Earth passed through a debris stream which were the remains of the Younger Dryas comet? Could this affect only the northern hemisphere? Well, from what I've read, yeah, it is possible. Whether it's probable or not is another matter. Alright, this particular graph shows, it's a temperature graph, and there's lots of different temperature graphs around. But this particular one shows a span of 500 million years, which is a pretty long period of time. The reason why I include this particular one is because it covers 500 million years, and if you look on the graph where at 0, which is current time, temperatures appear to be lower, according to this graph, than at any time during the past 500 million years. Now, I don't think that's quite true. I'm sure the temperatures have fluctuated more, but in a graph covering 500 million years, it's probably difficult to show all of the ups and downs. If you follow this chart, there seems to have been two separate cataclysms. This is a temperature chart for the last 18,000 years, I think, and it is most probably compiled using the Greenland ice cores. I'm just guessing about that, I'm not even absolutely sure, but I think that's probably where they get the data from. If you look at it, you'll see that it seems to start at around about 13,500 before present. There's a very rapid rise in temperature. It goes up to quite close to the current level of temperature. In fact, it seems to be within half a degree of that. And after that, it goes in steady decline, where it reaches the bottom area down there, where it is at least 3 degrees colder than current temperature. I would have thought it might have been more cold than that, but that's what I'm seeing in the graph. And then at around somewhere close to 10,000 years before the present, it suddenly spiked again, going back up to that level which is close to the same temperature we are at today. and then didn't come down dramatically as it had before. In fact, it stayed high and even went higher at times, and there's some fluctuations which stay here, but all these fluctuations are at a much higher level than what was before 13,500 before present. And there's even a little ice age included here, which I think represents the time of somewhere around mid 1800s to around about 1900s. Not much of a gap between the end of the graft and that. But this, if I read this, and this is accurate, then I'm going to have to say that there were two cataclysms that occurred during this period of between 14,000 before present and, well, say 9,000 before present. If you look at the grafts, this particular area here, before that the temperature was going up gradually. At that particular time, so roughly 13,500 years ago, it shot up very dramatically, very rapidly. And something had to happen to cause that. It can't happen by itself. Now, from what I do know and reading between the lines and whatever, I'm going to guess that what happened here was what's known as a corona ejection from the sun. And this corona ejection came along and affected the Earth, obviously brought along a heat of its own, but it started many forest fires and things like that, which then also, of course, created a lot of heat by themselves, and also lots of ash, smoke, and carbon in the air, whatever. And this had the effect of insulating the Earth from the rays of the sun thereafter. And that is why the temperature then went down immediately after that period. So you can see the period we're referring to. This is the period where the temperature went down, and it went down quite a long way by the looks of things, even lower than that area there, which was before this happening. This, by the way, is ideas of my own, which, if I look at this, what I tend to think about, I have, of course, had input from what other people say, and I've read what this person might say and that person might say. But this is what I've decided, well, I think happened at that time. And then when we get to there, which is roughly 10,000 before BC, more or less, another something happened which caused temperatures to rise very dramatically. As you can see, they went up to almost seemed like slightly higher than that, but they definitely rose very rapidly in that period as well. That will be somewhere in the region of 10,000 BC. Now, there's much talk about a comet strike which occurred at around that time, which is known as a Younger Dryas. And if we look at the Younger Dryas, let's say that it was caused by a comet strike. And according to the previous slide that I showed you, it appears that the comet strike would have occurred in North America. And North America was covered by massive ice sheets. At least that's according to all the scientific people. They say there were massive ice sheets and glaciers and whatever else have you there. This comet striking that particular area, the comet doesn't come in slowly, it comes in at quite a high speed, so it would have generated a lot of energy and a lot of heat would have been generated as this comet struck. And if it did strike an ice sheet over North America, then I think what would have happened almost immediately is that a vast amount of ice would have been melted. And also remembering that comets themselves are, according to what they told me in my high school days, they are regarded as dirty snowballs. They consist mainly of water in themselves. If comet struck at that time, as I said, it would have generated a lot of heat, and it would have also generated a lot of evaporation, which I think is important for our point, because what happens with the evaporation is it saturated the atmosphere of the Earth with water, and this water would then have started to fall in the form of rain. As you can see there on that graph, there's a slight dip just after it reaches peak. Now I think that's possibly caused by the water vapor in the atmosphere forming clouds, which have the same effect as smoke, stopping us the rays of the sun from getting to the Earth. But at the same time, it would also have caused a lot of rain. And there was possibly massive amounts of rain, because, as I said, you have the ice sheets, you have a comet which consists mainly of water, and you have a lot of evaporation taking place, the Earth's atmosphere being saturated. That can cause massive amounts of rain, and what that massive amount of rain would have done is to wash the atmosphere clean of the ash and smoke and whatever else from the earlier cataclysm, which I think was a corona mass ejection. And thereafter, because all of that ash and stuff had been washed out of the atmosphere, we then found temperatures were able to rise again with the heat, because the heat of the sun is getting to the Earth. And also it would have caused a lot of clouds, and clouds, well, possibly nighttime clouds. Clouds do have the effect, as you can see here, the clouds have a greenhouse effect which traps heat in. So it's possibly that greenhouse effect of the clouds caused the temperature to rise there. And it does show dips, and there's a Holocene maximum, and the other dips, and as you can see, the graph goes down pretty much not too far off the level we're on right now. There was a little ice age which is marked there, and that was a period of where it was very cold on Earth. Of course, the graph here is showing at 0 and -2, -4. So even that temperature looks like less than 1 degree away from where we are today. But that is probably an average temperature for the world, which is, I think, what this is meant to measure. And that probably doesn't indicate what the temperatures were in different areas around the world. But that is what I would make of this particular graph. I can't say about the accuracy and all that. I really can't say. I've just given you my, I almost want to say, common sense reading of it. I'm sure that many people will find it amusing and will laugh at it and say, you're crazy and so on. That's quite possible. I might be crazy, but then there were some crazy people in the past too who turned out to be not so crazy later on. This is a illustration of what a coronal mass ejection looks like. As you can see in the center, the big black spot is obviously the sun that's been blocked out. You can see the tremendous outpouring of plasma or energy or whatever, especially on the left side. And whether such outpourings can actually reach the earth, I don't know. I understand from what I've been reading and listening about other people say, seems it is possible. And there are signs, various places around the world, like in Egypt, for example, where there are signs of stone that has been heated to a very high degree. So possibly such a coronal mass ejection could reach the Earth. This slide shows a representation of a comet entering the Earth's atmosphere. A comet would come in at a pretty high speed. I don't know the exact speed, but I imagine it's going to be in the region of thousands of kilometers per hour. This would generate a huge amount of energy. Also the impact is meant to have occurred on the North American ice sheets. Such an impact would have generated a massive amount of energy, and this energy in turn would have led to a high rate of ice melt, not only on the North American ice sheets, but of course the comet itself, which well, I was taught in high school is a dirty snowball. And so the end result would have been a huge amount of water suddenly being introduced onto the North American continent. An additional effect of this, all this energy, would have been a very high evaporation rate, which might have caused the atmosphere to become saturated with water vapor. This saturation would have caused a high rainfall, maybe even a very high rainfall. This rainfall again would have removed a lot of ash and smoke from the atmosphere, allowing the sun to heat the earth again. The first event generates the black line archaeologists find called the Younger Dryas boundary line. The second event is what ended the Ice Age. This is according to the logic of an untrained mind, and the untrained mind belongs to yours truly. Of course, I'm no expert in all of these matters. I'm just trying to figure out, according to my sort of logic, what might have happened. And I dare say there are a lot of people who will not agree with me, but that's neither here nor there. Degree of heat. Now the other thing I want to talk about is the other effect of the comet impact that might have on the Earth, and that is, this is to my mind, you must just remember that I'm not an authority. I'm a layman putting forward ideas. I'm not authority on this stuff, and you can do your own thoughts and check your own. You can check what the experts have to say. But what I'd like to point out here is that the effect of a comet striking the Earth, let's say this comet was 50 kilometers wide. It's not impossible, apparently it can quite easily be. the impact would have been pretty severe, and there would be an extreme amount of energy involved in such an impact. And that impact would be, at least according to the Younger Dryas debris field graph I showed you earlier, comet was traveling from west to east. It could have caused the Earth to rotate slightly faster. I mean, after all, impact of that nature, the energy's got to go somewhere. And that energy could have been, some of it could have been transferred to the Earth, caused the Earth to go, it only needs to be like 1.5%. Caused the Earth to turn 1.5% faster, so that instead of having a 360-day year, we suddenly had a 365-day year. Now, what's interesting, if you follow that theory and you look at it, this would also help to explain why there are so many stone circles all over the world, not only in the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere. You find them all over. Now, these stone circles were to mark certain times of the year. I mean, you know that you know when the sun stops moving to the north, you know when the sun stops moving to the south in relation to the Earth, and all of this would be of great help to establish a new calendar. What makes sense to me is that many of the old calendars, and we're talking now about from the Maya and the Aztec up to India, Egypt, the Sumerians, and even the Zoroastrians, and possibly the Chinese. I don't know. I haven't checked on all of them, but very many of our ancient civilizations had calendars, initial calendars, which operated on 360 days in a year. Not 365 as we have now, 360. And they added extra days. In fact, I'm told the Maya or the Aztec, they added in what they call 5 extra evil days. They called them evil because they didn't quite fit the calendar they're supposed to fit. And this is common throughout Egypt as well. They also added 5 extra days, and other places also had to add 5 extra days because their calendars were not accurate or no longer accurate. But these calendars must have been handed down to them from previous civilizations. If I'm correct, then even our system of 360 days, 360 degrees in a circle would have had the same origin as the 360-day calendars. I mean, it would make sense if your year amounted to 360 days. It would make sense to use 360 degrees in a circle, and then you divide it up into sections of 60, which is the system we still sit with today, and it works quite well actually, but the origins of it are lost to time. I think, or I suspect, that's what actually happened was that in the old days there used to be 360 days in a year. And when I say old days, we're talking prehistoric, say before things like the Younger Dryas impact and all that. So up to 11,000 years ago, our calendar was 360 days in a year, and it was probably accurate. I can't see that the people of those times, who by the way were just as intelligent as we are no more intelligent than they were, We have progressed a lot, yes, no problem with that. But we've progressed in different directions. I think they probably knew stuff that we still have to find out. But that's just my opinion. And I'm saying that the reason why there are so many stone circles like this one here is Stonehenge. The others I'm not sure. I think this one at the bottom is Adam's calendar from South Africa. I can't remember where the others are from. Now, all that remains to mention is that there were still portions of the comet in orbit around the Sun, and the Earth would pass through this orbit once or twice per year. We would then be at the risk of large chunks of ice raining down, causing severe risk to people. Dolmens was specifically built as shelters for those times. The hazardous conditions would have persisted for another 1,000 years. We don't know. This hazard would only affect the northern hemisphere. That's an assumption on my part, by the way. The illustration is what an ice meteor would look like. Now, you can just imagine something like this, made of solid ice, coming hurtling in from upper atmosphere at who knows what speed, probably a few thousand kilometers per hour, and smashing down on Earth. Anybody getting in the way would be quite seriously damaged. This could be up to 100 kilograms, or I imagine that if a 500 kilogram block of ice came into the atmosphere, it would melt away as it heats up in the atmosphere, and it might only be 100 kilograms when it gets to the Earth. And some chunks of it might fall off in the meantime. But still 100 kilograms of ice like this, moving at a speed of even 1,000 kilometers a second, would cause some pretty serious damage. And that is possibly why these dolmens had such pretty heavy capstones on. I mean, it was for shelter from something like this. That's my guess. Whether you agree with me or not, it's another matter. But thank you for watching, and I hope you found this thought-provoking.